Yes.
Oh, get out my glasses. Okay, got them. I can't.
Good evening. I hereby call this regular meeting of the Nacogdoches ISD Board of Trustees to order. Let a record show that a quorum is present and notice of this meeting was legally posted in accordance with the Texas Open Meetings Act. Please remember items on the agenda do not have to be taken in the order shown, and please join us in silencing your cell phones. Thank you for joining us tonight, whether you are in person or watching via YouTube. The first item on our agenda tonight is an executive closed session to discuss the items posted on our agenda pursuant to the following provisions of the Texas Open Meetings Act and is allowed by Texas Government Code sections 551.071, 551.072, 551.074, and 551.129. No voting will take place in the closed meeting. Any action the board wishes to take as a result of discussion in closed session will take place after the board reconvenes in open session. It is now 5:01 p.m. I will ask that we are going to hold executive session in this room tonight, so if you will please clear the room for us. Thank you so much.
pledge allegiance to thee, Texas, one under God, one and indivisible.
All right, we'll now turn to Dr. Trujillo for this month's good news.
Wonderful, wonderful. Got some great information to share. One item we have is Nacogdoches High School's Golden Dragon Marching Band is headed to state. So we're excited about that. The NHS band, led by Director Jacob Weems, will march Wednesday in the UIL State Military Marching Band Contest being held in Pine Tree High School in Longview. The band will perform Wednesday afternoon, and when they advance as finalists, will perform again that evening. You can check out the NISD website and social media accounts for details. The band's qualifications for the military marching contest comes after NHS received a first division rating at the Region 21 contest on October 16th at the Lobo Stadium in Longview. The Dragons received ones from all three judges. It's the band's 41st top rating since 1980. Congratulations to our band program, and congratulations to Mr. Weems. We're proud of your effort, and the good luck to them this next week. So excited about that. Also, congratulations to the Nacogdoches ISD Ag students who placed last weekend at the Pine Woods Fair. Our students brought home top awards with their animals and with their projects. Several of the students showed rabbits last weekend, are in the elementary and middle school age group. It's an effort by the Ag Department to get students working in agriculture and livestock shows as early as possible before getting to high school. Great work by our teachers in the CTE department and our students who did so well. So this next one is hot off the press. I'm talking right hot off the press, and something we just learned today. Thomas J. Rusk Elementary School is ranked among the top 25% of all elementary schools in the state of Texas. According to ratings, I apologize, Ms. Hartberger. I did not call you to even give you a warning. I wanted it to be a surprise to you as far as what we found out. It's exciting. They're the top 25% of all elementary schools in the state of Texas, according to ratings released by the U.S. News and World Report. TJR is the number 1,277 ranked elementary school in the state of Texas, placing it the 25th percentile of all elementary schools in the state. Obviously, we've had more on this in the coming days, but I wanted everyone to know this as soon as it came out. Congratulations to Ms. Harshberger and her team, because that's what she'll say. It's her team around her at TJR, to the staff and teachers, and to the students and their parents. Way to go. Good job. That's my report.
It's going to be hard to beat that. That's wonderful. We're going to move on to public comment. We did not receive any requests to address the board as outlined in our meeting notice tonight. That's going to take us to our discussion agenda item. We've got one item on the agenda tonight: receive and discuss initial assessment report regarding whether redistricting is required for Board of Trustees districts considering the new 2020 census data. Dr. Trujillo.
President Finch and board, what we've got through the Zoom, we've got David Mendez with Bickerstaff, Heath Delgado and Acosta, and they'll be presenting to us at this time. So at his pleasure, we can go ahead and transition over to Mr. Mendez.
Mr. Mendez, can you hear us okay? Mr. Mendez, can you hear us okay? Oh, we can't hear you. Hold on.
The wonders of technology. We'll get it going.
Yes. All right, Mr. Mendez, can you try that again? Let's see if we can hear you.
Yeah, I'm going to test this. I'm David Mendez from Bickerstaff Heath. Pleased to be with you this afternoon.
Perfect. Thank you so much. We appreciate you joining us, sir.
How's that audio sound?
So it's good.
You have the floor, sir.
Okay, so I want to take a few minutes of your time, trustees, to review the results of the analysis of the 2020 census as it relates to the Macadoches School District, and in particular to the trustee districts that you have from which you elect single-member districts, that are your single-member districts. What I'm going to do here is, I'm thinking this will work, is I'm going to share my screen. I don't know if that's up. Can you see that? Yeah, let's see.
Not yet.
Not yet.
Yeah, so you should be able to, yeah. So what I'm going to do is walk you through the high points, if you will, of the presentation of the material that I sent to the board that is dated October the 20th. This was sent to Pam Fitch at the district, and it's a report on the census. And so I'm going to go with that information and then entertain some questions from you all. And kind of, there are three things I'm going to cover tonight. I want to walk you through, of course, the numbers for the school district and your particular trustee districts. But before I do that, I want to explain the reason, the obligation that you have to examine this data every decade. And this is for your benefit as well as for the members of the public, so that we can all have an understanding of why the Board of Trustees has to look at this issue and then what obligations it's under as it proceeds with the project. The third thing I'm going to do, and where we're going to end, is I'm going to recommend that you adopt two policies, and we provided those as part of your packet. They're listed on the agenda. And one of them is a set of criteria that we use in the process of redistricting as we realign the trustee boundaries. These are the rules, if you will, of how we're going to accomplish that. And they are designed to keep us within the parameters of the legal principles that I'm going to describe. The second policy is a guideline for the public to participate, because you want to allow the public the opportunity to give you feedback and input on how the districts are designed for the benefit of your constituents. So with all of that in mind, what I want to do is lay out the legal principles that apply. You, as a Board of Trustees, are responsible, or the legislators, if you will, for Nacogdoches ISD. You make policy and laws for the citizens of the school district as relates to your mission, the education of the children. And so you're governed as legislators by the one person, one vote principle. This is exactly the same principle that applies to Congress or the House of Representatives of Texas or the Senate. So each of you must be elected from of the five of you that are elected from districts, each of the five must have roughly an equal territory. There's a slight difference from the Congress, because in Congress, if we have 38 seats of Congress in Texas, each of the 38 seats must have exactly 1/38 of the population of Texas to the person. For legislators like yourselves, schools, cities, counties, and others, we have some leeway. And so the districts don't have to be perfectly equal. They can be within 10% of each other, and I'm going to describe that here in a second. We're also going to look at some voting rights issues and some other constitutional issues that govern the process. So the one person, one vote principle is, as I've explained, is fairly simple. We are, as a rule of thumb, courts will allow you a deviation between the most populous and least populous district of less than 10%. You can't be more than 10% out of balance. Well, what does that mean? Well, I've got a simple example here that'll kind of make this clear. This is a school district that has 4 districts, just for purposes of ease of understanding the principle. It has 40,000 people under the census, and so each of the ideal district size for each of the 4 districts would of course be 10,000 people. In our example, District A has 11,000 people, or has a 10% deviation from that ideal. District D has an 8,000 total population under the census, and it is therefore 20% underpopulated. The way a court would look at this is that the school district is 30% out of balance. They take the 10 and the 20, disregard the pluses and minuses. They accumulate those digits, and the district is 30% out of balance. And so the exercise would be to move the boundaries of these various districts so that each one of them was less, the maximum deviation between any 2 districts was not more than 10%. And we'll talk more about that in a minute. So what data do we use for that? Well, the Census Bureau released in mid-August the PL 94-171 file. This is a result of the census that we take every decade for the community there in Macadoches. It referenced every man, woman, and child, the total population, if you will, in the school district, and we've allocated that to the various districts here within the territory. Now, that's a number we're going to use to find our maximum deviation, but I've also provided in your file some charts that show the voting age population. Well, why do we need that? Well, the voting age population, as well as the race and identity of folks, is important for the school board to examine, because as we redraw the boundaries, we want to be cognizant of any groups of protected minorities under the Voting Rights Act, and make sure that we don't pack or crack those populations as we move. So again, and I'll explain these principles here in a second. So again, total population is how we're going to figure out that the districts are in balance. The voting age population is simply for us to measure voting strength. And so what does it mean to measure voting strength? Well, Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act, which applies to us, says that the school board can't discriminate on the basis of race or language minority as against a group of protected citizens. These are listed in the Voting Rights Act, and generally, if we identify a sufficiently large and geographically compact group of these citizens within your community, you're prohibited from cracking or fracturing that population so that you minimize their strength among various districts. You submerge them into various districts, and that would be illegal. Likewise, you can't pack them all into one district so as to minimize their ability to elect multiple board members. They need to be able to influence. So there's a weighing of these principles that apply. So the corresponding rights of the Anglo voter are also recognized under the 14th Amendment and under Hvac. So you're walking kind of a tightrope, if you will, as we redistrict. And the Hvac case from 1996 limits race-based decision-making by the school board to you have to narrowly tailor any examination of race to just solve that packing or cracking problem. So that's the only reason we're going to look at race here, and otherwise we're going to worry about the business of the school board. What's important for your constituents to know about you and representing them here at the board as relates to their attendance zone or the schools in your district or the programs that the school district puts together. And so what the courts have ended up with is a set of redistricting standards that ensure that race is not a predominant factor, that we really focus on a real business of the school. We only narrowly tailor looking at race to take care of that voting rights issue, and we try to avoid bizarre-shaped districts or what's called gerrymandering. And how do you do that? Well, one of the policies that I proposed to the district to do that is one that school districts, cities, and counties and the state have used throughout the history of the Voting Rights Act in Texas. And what they do is they say, as we draw, we're going to use readily identifiable boundaries to divide our districts. We're going to try to maintain neighborhoods and communities of interest together. So if you have kids that go to one elementary school or other, sometimes school district, trustee districts are designed to have all of the people who attend all of the kids who attend a particular zone, that those parents are included in your trustee district or things of that nature. We also are going to try to use whole voting precincts if possible so that everybody, typically most of us in Macadoches would know what voting precinct we belong to and have belonged to for years. And so that's a unit that is fairly recognizable. So we try to use whole voting precincts when we draw to the extent possible. Some of these districts are so small, the trustee district's so small that you can't keep the election precincts together, but you do the best you can. We also want to use your existing trustee districts as the basis for doing it. So we're going to modify them as little as necessary to just bring them into balance, but try to keep you with your constituents. So we're trying to keep existing incumbents with their people that elected them. We also want to adopt districts, of course, that have the right population. We want to make sure they're compact and contiguous and easily understood. So that's one of the two resolutions you have that you're going to be looking at. Now, if you were on the board 10 years ago and you redistricted, you would have been subject to Section 5 of the Voting Rights Act. Back in those days, and in fact, for all of the prior decades here in Texas, since I've been doing this is my fourth round of these things. But when we finished the redistricting in prior decades, we would have to send the plan that we had adopted at the school board before we could implement it. We'd have to send it to Washington, and then they would have to say grace over it, and we would have to be pre-cleared by the Department of Justice so that they would say we were not discriminating against any group. And that law no longer applies to Texas. Since 2013, in 2013, the court struck that down. And so now we're responsible as a school district. We're the primary responsible person for making sure we abide by the Voting Rights Act. And that's my job, is to kind of walk you along the requirements of that. So how are we going to do all of the process? This is the beginning of it, this initial assessment we're doing right now. The next step with the adoption of criteria for the process ensures that we use the right principles to redistrict. And I'm also proposing a set of guidelines for the public to give you input so that if they want to draw a plan or help you with, give you advice on the plan, that we get that in writing, that they use the same kind of numbers we're using to draw it so that we can compare apples to apples if the community gives you a plan. We're going to have a system where I'm going to solicit information from each of the trustees through a questionnaire, and I'll explain why in a minute. And then based on the information I get from you all, I'm going to develop an illustrative plan which I'll bring to a work session, and then the board at that work session can take that and refine it into what you want your districts to look like. As we draw through those work sessions, I'll propose a public comment or hearing at the latter stages of that process so that you can take comment from the community and that input, and then we'll analyze all of those comments so you can adopt a plan and implement it. And so those things, the way that my team has organized them with the superintendent is that we're presenting the initial assessment today. In a couple of weeks, we would come back. I'm going to circulate the questionnaire after this meeting, and then in a couple of weeks, we'll come back on the 11th, come back for a drawing session, come back in early December for a second drawing session. This gives you some time to review the drawings with your constituents and to get input. And then on January 14th, sorry about that, on January 14th to consider adoption of the final plan. The January 14th date ensures that we're done with this whole process before the filing period for the next trustee elections occurs. The filing period begins in mid-January, goes through mid-February, and the elections will be in May. So with that in mind, I want to now jump to the numbers. So these are the existing district boundaries for the community, and these are the numbers. If your population dropped to 46,428, that's a couple hundred people less than where you were in 2010. And if based on that population divided among the 5 districts, the ideal district size would be 9,286 in each district. Now, District 1, as you can see, is slightly underpopulated at 13.18%, or about 8,062 persons. District number 2 is slightly overpopulated at 9,844. 3 is slightly under at 8,705, and 4 is over at 388. And likewise, number 5 is pretty much even, but at about 1.4% above the ideal. So you can see that when you look at this map, and each of these, the numbers that are laid out for each of the corresponding districts, if you look at the difference between the ideal size and where we are, we're roughly about 800 people off. To get it, if we add 800 people to number 1, that would put it at about 0% or even. Likewise, in the next one, if it lost 500 people. So you can see that the changes are really tiny, and in many cases, just moving a few blocks in a neighborhood or a part of a sense of an election precinct will solve the problem. And so that's the exercise, is moving the boundaries between the trustee districts so as to get the 13% overpopulated and the 11% underpopulated to be less than that, so that none of these are, so that the total maximum deviation is not more than 10%. And that's the exercise here from a mathematical standpoint. We talked about the treatment of race or the treatment of protected minority groups, and I have information in your packet, and this chart summarizes that. But one of the things we'll be keeping track of is the districts where there is a substantial minority population. In particular, districts 1 and 3 have substantial communities of African American population combined with some Hispanic, or Hispanic being a predominant group combined with some African American. And so you can see, for example, in District 1, that it has the largest group of identifiable folks that from the census is African American. They're 47.9% of that district, and the Hispanics constitute 20.86% of that district, with the remainder being Anglo or Asian or other. And so when we redraw district number 1, which needs population about 800 people, we're going to try to keep these numbers of voting age people or percentages of voting age people more or less even, to keep that strength in these 2 districts, 1 and 3. 3 has is flipped the other way, where it's predominantly Hispanic with a substantial amount of African American population. And so I don't know, but typically districts like that would perform and elect candidates from those communities, or the candidates of choice of those various communities. And so that is the exercise from a voting standpoint or voting rights standpoint. And what we're going to do, there's these other charts in there that have more detail about the numbers, and I'm going to just skip through I have lots of detailed charts for you that you can use, but the 2 that I think will help us rebalance at least districts 1 and 3 when we're going through it, this is a thematic. And what my team did is they went and explored by census block where concentrations of Hispanics are. And the little ranking or table here on the bottom right shows what the color scheme is. The darker the color is there, the higher the percentage of Hispanic population in that block. And so the exercise would be, and when we put this up on the computer, it'll be a lot easier to read, but this is where we can blow this up, if you will. But what it allows us to do is to find areas that if we have to add population to districts 1 and 3, find population that is either Hispanic, or in this case, here's a chart of African American population, Macadoches. And we can find blocks of citizens that are of that community so that we can enhance or maintain the voting strength of those groups as we go through it. And we'll only use this for that limited purpose. So that's my presentation. As I said, you have these legal obligations, but it's a math exercise. The 2 resolutions that you have before you for consideration lay out and track the things that the courts have found to be lawful exercise of your power, the things you should look at. And that's what the first resolution is on criteria. The other one is my attempt to try to allow the citizenry to participate, for you to allow public input in a organized way so we can use it constructively to build this. Madam Chair, members of the board, I'd love to answer any questions you have.
All right, thank you for your time tonight. Let me open it up to the board to see if there are any questions. All right. Hearing none, again, Mr. Mendez, we appreciate your time tonight. Thank you so much for joining us.
You're welcome. If you all will let me know if do you want me to hang on, to stand by as you act on the resolutions, or how do you want to handle that?
Dr. Trujillo?
Absolutely. We've got the resolutions in hand.
Yes.
And
that's next up.
If Mr. Mendez can, I think we're complete with Mr. Mendez. So thank you, Mr. Mendez, very much for your time. And we look forward to working with you, each individual board member, and as a collective board and the community of Nacogdoches. We thank you so much for your time.
You're welcome, and I'll send along the questionnaires here shortly.
Thank you, sir. Yes.
Thank you,
Good
sir.
evening.
All right, that will take us to item 6A1, discuss and consider adoption of redistricting criteria to apply to development of new districting plans. Do we have a motion?
Yes, Madam President. Do I make the motion and then read the criteria, or read the criteria and make the motion?
I think let's take a motion and get a second, and then I'll come back to you to read the resolution.
Okay, motion 1. I move to approve the order adopting criteria for use in the 2021 redistricting process.
Thank you. We've got a motion on the floor by Dr. Groman. Do we have a second?
I second.
And a second by Mr. Naramond. Thank you so much. Dr. Groman, if you'll please read that resolution into the record.
If you'll hold with me, it's a little lengthy. Order adopting criteria for use in 2021 redistricting process. Whereas the Board of Trustees has certain responsibility for redistricting under federal and state law, including but not limited to Amendments 14 and 15 to the United States Constitution, USCA Section 2 of the Voting Rights Act 52 USCA, and 10301 and Texas Government Code ANN period 2058.001 and 2058.002, and whereas review of the 2020 census data reveals that a population imbalance exists among the district trustees districts requiring redistricting of those districts, and whereas it is the intent of the district to comply with the Voting Rights Act and with all other relevant law, including Shaw versus Reno jurisprudence, and whereas a set of established redistricting criteria will serve as a framework to guide the district in the formulation and consideration of district plans, and Whereas redistricting criteria will provide the district a means by which to evaluate proposed plans, and whereas redistricting criteria will assist the district in its efforts to comply with all applicable federal and state laws. Now, therefore be it resolved and ordered that the district in its adoption of a redistricting plan for the trustee districts will adhere to the following criteria to the greatest extent possible when establishing new trustee district boundaries. To the extent practicable. 1. Easily identifiable geographic boundaries should be followed. 2. Communities of interest should be maintained in a single district map. An attempt should be made to avoid splitting neighborhoods. 3. Trustee districts should be composed of whole voting precincts where this is not possible or practicable. Districts should be drawn considering county election precincts. Avoid splitting census blocks unnecessarily. 4. Although it is recognized that existing districts will have to be altered to reflect new population distribution in the district, any districting plan should be based on existing districts. 5, districts must be configured so that they are relatively equal in total population according to the 2020 federal census. In no event should the total population deviation between the largest and the smallest district exceed 10% as compared to the ideal precinct size. 6, the district should be compact and composed of contiguous territory. Compactness may contain a functional as well as geographic dimension. 7, consideration may be given to the preservation of the incumbent constituency relations by recognition of the residents of incumbents and their history in representing certain areas. 8, the plan should be narrowly tailored to avoid racial gerrymandering in violation of Shaw versus Reno. 9, the plan should not fragment a geographically compact minority community or pack minority voters in the presence of polarized voting or otherwise discriminate against protected groups so as to create liability under the Voting Rights Act. The board will review all plans concerning these criteria and will evaluate how well each plan conforms to the criteria. Any plan submitted to the board by a citizen for its consideration should be a complete plan, i.e., it should include all 5 trustee districts and should redistrict the entire district. The Board of Trustees may decline to consider any plan that is not a complete plan. All plans submitted by citizens, as well as plans submitted by staff, consultants, and members of the Board of Trustees, should conform to these criteria. This resolution shall be effective upon passage by the Board of Trustees.
Thank you, Dr. Groman. Any discussion or questions? Hearing none, all those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you. That'll take us to our second resolution, item 6A2. Discuss and consider adoption of redistricting guidelines regarding public participation in the redistricting process. Do we have a motion?
I'd like to make a motion. I move to approve the resolution for guidelines for persons submitting specific redistricting proposals and providing comment.
Thank you. We've got a motion on the floor with Dr. Groman. Do we have a second?
I do a second as well. I do.
All right. Second by Mr. Neermond. Dr. Groman, if you would read this one into the record as well.
I hope you're hearing me because it's a long one too. Guidelines for persons submitting specific redistricting proposals and providing comments. Whereas this Board of Trustees has certain responsibilities for redistricting the district's trustee districts under federal and state law, including but not limited to Amendments 14 and 15 to the United States Constitution, USCA, and Section 2 of the Voting Rights Acts, 52 USCA 10301 and Texas Government Code ANN period 2058.001 and 2058.002, and whereas it is necessary to provide for the orderly consideration and evaluation of redistricting plans which may come before the board, and whereas these guidelines relate to persons who have specific redistricting plans they wish the board to consider, and whereas the board also welcomes any comments relevant to the redistricting process. Now therefore be it resolved that in order to make sure that any comments regarding the redistricting process and any redistricting plan that might be submitted are of maximum assistance to the board in its decision-making process, the board hereby sets the following guidelines to be followed by each person submitting a comment or a redistricting plan for consideration. 1. Proposed plans must be submitted in writing and be legible. If a plan is submitted orally, there is significant opportunity for misunderstanding, and it is possible that errors may be made in analyzing. The board wants to be sure that all proposals are fully and accurately considered. 2. Any plan must show the total populations and voting age population for African Americans, Hispanics, Asians, and Anglo others for each proposed trustee district based on the 2020 census data. If a plan is submitted without a population breakdown, the board may not have sufficient information to give it full consideration. 3. Plans should redistrict the entire district. The board will be considering the effect of any plans of the entire district. Any plan is subject to the Voting Rights Act, which protects various racial and language minorities. Thus, as a matter of federal law, the board will be required to consider the effect of any proposal on multiple racial and ethnic groups. If a plan does not redistrict the entire district, it may be impossible for the board to assess its impact on one or more protected minority groups. 4. Plans should conform to the redistricting criteria the board will be using in drawing the trustee districts. 5. Comments must be submitted in writing and be legible even if the person also makes the comment orally or at public hearing. 6. Persons providing comments and those submitting proposed plans must identify themselves by full name and home address and provide a phone number and, if available, an email address. The board may wish to follow up on such comments or obtain additional information about submitted plans. 7. All comments and proposed plans must be submitted to the Board of Trustees by the close of the public hearing. This resolution shall be effective upon passage by the Board of Trustees.
Thank you, Dr. Groman. Are there any questions or comments or discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you very much. All right, that's going to take us to our consent agenda, item 7. Unless removed from the consent agenda, all items will be listed will be acted on with one motion. If there is a board member who wishes to discuss an item on the consent agenda separately, please indicate the agenda letter, and it will be set aside for further discussion and a separate vote. Hearing none, I will open the floor for a motion.
Madam President, I move the board approve the consent agenda.
Thank you, Mr. Nermond. We have a motion. Do we have a second?
Second.
I think Reverend Irvin's got the second.
I thought Ms. Montoya.
Oh,
It's all right.
Mr. Montoya.
Either works.
All right. We'll give it to Mr. Montoya then. All right, any discussion, questions? Hearing none, all those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you so very much. That's going to take us to our report section of the agenda, and before we hit our next report, Board, we're going to take about a 10-minute break. We can stretch our legs before we get into the next report, and that will give Mr. Linebarger an opportunity to get us our technology connected.
Hey, Trent, can you hear us okay?
I can.
All right, good. Good deal. We're getting ready to come back out of a break, and we'll get started here in just a second.
Sounds good.
Reconvene, it is 6:50. We're going to move to report section, item 8 on tonight's agenda. Our first report, item A, attendance zone boundaries, demographer report. Mr. Martin.
Thank you, President Fitch, members of the board, Dr. Trujillo. If it pleases the board, President Fitch, I would like to yield the floor to Mr. Trent Smith with Zonda Education, formerly known as Templeton Demographics.
Good evening, Mr. Smith. How are you?
I'm doing well. President Fish. Thank you for having me tonight. And members of the board, Dr. Trujillo, good to see you guys again. Tonight, I'm going to be going through just a little bit of an introduction as to how the Zonda Education and how we do things as far as attendance zone planning. And so to give you a much better idea of kind of how our company works, how our software works, and to try to kind of give you the best idea possible of how this process goes as we move forward into this attendance zone planning. So tonight I'm going to share my screen, and I'm going to go through a brief presentation, and then I've got the software open from a different district, but kind of give you an idea exactly how this all works. So let's get started with this. So just a brief introduction on how we build our projections for districts. So the first thing we do is we put together a map of the district and we break it up into planning areas. And so that basically is summarized in this first slide here, showing you a little bit of kind of breaking the district down into puzzle pieces. And then we look at where the students live. So that's our student geocode, and we basically put in a student for every parcel that a student lives in. And so this is kind of a representation of a map showing you a little bit about what that geocode looks like. So these are, each dot would represent a student in this case. And then we look at your enrollment trends, kind of what's been happening over the last several years, and how different classes move from one position to another. We talked a little bit about that in my previous meeting with you guys. Then we look at the housing market and what is the housing market doing in the area, and we apply that housing market and the changes coming in that market to all of these trends. And putting all of that information together, we put together our 10-year enrollment forecast. We also include some ideas in that process about mobility. Are people moving in from different places? We look at birth rates to kind of help us with those lower grades and what we can anticipate with those lower grades. And then we looked at the impact of charter schools. And we also look a little bit into that as well. We look into not just charter schools, but also open districts in the area that might have an impact on a district as well. So all of those kind of factor in to that 10-year enrollment forecast. And that's the beginning of where we go. Then we put those, as I mentioned before, we geocode the students into our GIS software, or a graphic information software. And so when we do that, it helps us look at the demographics of the students, the housing data, what neighborhoods are driving different populations in different school zones. And so you can see this example here. I think this is Eagle Mountain, Saginaw up here in the DFW market. But we break it down into these different elementary zones. And then on this particular slide, you can see every one of those red dots actually represents an elementary school student. And so we break it down into just elementary kids. And then we've broken this one down into look at, okay, where, how many kids are in each one of these neighborhoods, and what is it going to mean if we move some of these kids from one attendance zone to another. And so we also, that's part of the process that we go through. And then we also look at different things like, what is the goal of the attendance zone boundary? Are we, we're trying to get balanced enrollment through the district. We look at the capacities of each one of those facilities. So we look at some facility utilization. We talk to the transportation department. We want them to be part of this because we want, to minimize transportation requirements and costs. We look at, options for, when a student or a group is moved, Are we going to allow grandfathering so that, say if they're a fourth grader, are we going to allow them to be a fifth grader next year, even though they live outside the zone, just because they've been in that school for the last several years? So we look at, those are options that that are in front of you as well. Is there are portable buildings coming into play? What are the boundary impacts on instructional programs like bilingual programs, special ed, all of those kinds of things come into play as well. Then we try to use as best we can natural boundaries like train tracks, rivers, lakes, all of those kinds of factors that come into play, and even some floodplain as well as we look through that. We also look at neighborhood unity. We want to do our very best to make sure that subdivisions are together, so that you don't have one child living across the street from another, but they go to different schools. And so that's kind of another factor that we look at. What are reasonable drive times? Those are also factors that we look at. And can we maintain this for a certain length of time? So when we look at this pattern, is it going to be something that is good utilization for the next several years, or is one area growing so fast that it's going to mess up that utilization in the future? So then I mentioned before, we look at facility utilization, so we look at capacities and the potential that's coming into those particular campuses. Then we look at that growth potential in each one of those campuses, and then we look at long-range planning. What are the long-term goals of the district to accomplish through this process? So these are just some examples of things that we use as parameters around building attendance zones when you go through, when you're using us through Zonda Education. So then we take all of that data. So this is an example of an attendance zone plan for Fort Worth ISD. And what I hope you can see here is this dark blue lines that are in here. These are the original attendance zones. And then you can see how some of this green from this southwest attendance zone flows over into South Hills. Well, those are zones that we're attempting to move from South Hills into Southwest. And so all of these little numbers that now this is a high school plan. So all of these numbers that you see inside these areas, that's the number of high school students that are in each one of those neighborhoods. So it gives us a very visual look at what are we talking about if we try to move this section, how many students are we talking about? And then again, trying to use this Alta Mesa Boulevard here as a dividing line, how many students south of Alta Mesa Boulevard is that going to move into Southwest as well? So those are just examples that I was hoping that you could kind of see how this software works, how we do things through Zonda Education, and how we take those planning areas. So each one of those numbers represents a different planning area inside that particular high school zone. So then we compare, then we draw more than one plan most of the time. And so this is comparing two different plans. Again, this is Lake Dallas ISD. Now these are just examples of different elementary schools. But again, just to give you an idea, we look at the current numbers. And so you can see in this one, current capacities are here in this column. Then what is the current number inside these districts, or inside each one of these attendance zones? And then, what does that look like moving forward in each one of these? You can see in this particular one, Lake Dallas Elementary is going to grow well over capacity, within 2 years. And so, what would that do if we, so we give them two scenarios here. This first one is, some cross street references to kind of give people an idea which plan those are. But then comparing, okay, so if we do this first plan, that keeps us from getting too high, in Lake Dallas, and then this plan on the plan 2 actually even improves that a little bit more. So we'll have different options, as we move through this process to kind of compare and contrast what are the gains and losses in each one of those particular scenarios. And so that's kind of an overview there of what we're talking about. And then I've got the software open as well, so we can take a look at that. And so looking at, this is Argyle ISD, and so I just kind of wanted to show you in action what this looks like. I'm going to move the screen around a little bit. And so right now they have, currently have 2 attendance zones. And so I'm just throwing this scenario out. If this gray, there's this kind of gray color over here, you can see it's outlined in red. So those are the current attendance zones that they have. If we wanted to move this group of kids right here in this neighborhood, in these 2 neighborhoods over into this other elementary, basically what we look at is we grab those kids through their planning areas. So we select those planning areas, and then we move those into the alternate elementary zone. Basically, it creates a new zone. And then what we do is we look at, so here's your current grade report, and then that was Plan 2. I'm going to blow that up so you can read it, hopefully. Oops. And then looking at Plan 2 grade report. So basically what we've done in doing that, so looking at over here capacities, you can see that Argyle West is already over capacity, but what we've done is taking a look at what would change in those 2 scenarios. So we actually added more students to the wrong elementary zone in this case. We added another 100 students. And so, but you can see how that changes the numbers, and you get the utilizations. You get a number of economically disadvantaged students in each one, and what that percentage is when you're done. So that's an example of the software, kind of showing you how it works and what we will be doing, with your assistance, obviously, through this process. So I'd like to open it up to see just if there's any questions, and if I can answer any of those questions now, and hopefully I've kind of explained this process as best as possible.
You mentioned a little bit about the growth. How do you figure that growth within a zone?
So we actually get down to that planning area level. So let me highlight these planning areas so you can kind of see a little bit better about what I'm talking about. And so this purple lines in this particular map each one of those represents a planning area. And so when we talk about growth inside a planning area, and there's a tremendous amount of growth happening in Argyle. And so I'm also going to show you the subdivisions that are coming in. And so those are outlined in red, or green and yellow. And that's a little bit confusing, but so this particular subdivision here is adding about 200 to 250 homes a year into the district. And so we look at, and so it's divided into 3 different planning areas. And so we boil it down to, okay, how many new houses do we think are going to come into that neighborhood over the next several years, and how does that affect the growth based on the number of students they're getting in the current houses that are inside that neighborhood. And so that's really the most impactful way to look at growth, is the number of new houses being built in a particular area.
So does it factor in at all, like families that might move from one zone to another? Maybe they're purchasing a new house, or is that all included?
Yes, that's included.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Mr. Smith? All right. Hearing none, we appreciate you being with us tonight, sir.
Sure, not a problem. And if any questions come up, feel free to, get in touch with me. Mr. Martin has all of my information, so feel free to contact me any way you need.
Thank you. Any other comments on this, Dr. Trujillo, before we move?
None at all. Just one thing. Trent's working very closely with our teams in order the data that he's getting, because you'll be able to find out socioeconomic and services. If you notice when he made that shift, So there's a lot of dialogue that's happening, not just with the city and some of the things in development, but also we're trying to make sure he has the best data for our kids' transportation, make sure that whatever their address is at and wherever they're at. So it's exciting times to have, and you saw the tool. The tool is amazing as far as the technology for what he's doing. So pretty excited to have Trent on board working with us as we dive into the restructuring for our attendance numbers.
Absolutely.
Pam?
Yes.
I just had a comment. I have utmost confidence in the individuals we have directing us, but we also want to keep in mind that we can't do this alone, and we need the public, we need our stakeholders, the community to take part. We want to hear what they say, because they're going to have really good ideas that we would have never thought of. So if we combine these two things with what our job is, then that's going to make it the best job. So I hope people will join with us in doing this job.
That's a very good point, Dr. Grummond. We in our last speaker talked about some opportunities for public input on the election districts. I assume you will have some calendar opportunities for the public to provide input on the school zone attendance as well.
Absolutely. We'll have that. Matter of fact, we selectively had Trent come via Zoom. We felt this would be probably the most appropriate for him to give us an overview. He will be spending some time with us face-to-face here, and then we'll have the public come in as we are moving forward before we finalize this. We have a pretty extensive timeline. You'll see the timeline in the near future and in future meetings to let you know when and how it's all going to transpire as we go into the move for permanency.
Wonderful. Any other comments or questions? All right. Again, thank you, Mr. Smith. We look forward to seeing you in the future.
Hey, you're very welcome. You guys have a great evening.
You too.
Thank you.
That's going to take us to our next report, item 8B, bond construction update. Mr. Barton.
Good evening again. President Fitz.
I'm more concerned with the Zoom folks being able to hear him too. So.
Good evening again, President Fitch, members of the board, Dr. Trujillo. It brings us great pleasure to be here tonight to present to you a construction update. Our last update, I believe, was July the 15th of 2021. With me are my partners, Mr. Army Curtis, our architect, Mr. Ralph LaRue, our director of facilities, and Ms. Cindy Robertson. They will be helping me with this presentation as we go throughout, okay? So yesterday we had a wonderful tour of all of our new construction going on throughout the district. Dr. Trujillo, Dr. Hill, Lisa Barbarick, Les, myself, all jumped on the Baby Dragon and took a tour around the district, looking at all the wonderful work that is going on. We'll begin with our timeline, and if you would take a look in your folders, we've provided you with a paper copy of the timeline, and I'm going to ask Mr. Curtis to come up and talk a little bit about it.
Good evening, board members and Dr. Trujillo. I'm here tonight to help present our current construction schedule on all the bond projects. This schedule was updated as of the end of September and represents some input from the contractor as far as established completion times, or at least proposed completion times based on what's going on in the field versus actual completion as gathered from the pay applications that are submitted. So first up is the new Carpenter Elementary. They have They've made some time up since the last time we've met, but I think we're still seeing overall, they're probably 4 weeks behind proposed schedule. The work, as we get closer to the end here, it doesn't necessarily mean that they're 85% across the board. It means that portions of the work in the field, if you were to go out there today, are more complete than others, and that's by plan. They are working across the school and working from down to up. So the last areas that will be completed and then established for substantial completion will be the second floor of the classrooms. But if you were out there today, you would see a lot of other spaces have finishes going into them, have mechanical systems up and running, but there's still obviously work to be done. I think we have finally gotten their attention to some degree as far as our concerns about this kind of floating line at this completion date that seems to keep floating around. I think they're trying to dig their heels in and getting all the work substantially complete this year, and early December is probably that realistic date. I think we're past any big surprise items. They do complain about COVID, or have been complaining about COVID. That still is being worked out in terms of documentation, but and then there's some supply line issues that are affecting everybody. And but anyway, we're diligent in trying to stay on top of all that. So we're seeing potential move-in does not change in all this, and I'm showing move-in as being the summer of 2022, only because that's when we would expect you would be gearing in with your staff, teachers, materials for getting ready for the next school year as to when actually kids come in. Next up is Mcmichael Middle School. While they have been making progress out there too, they are still being shown from the data of being 4 to 6 weeks behind. We have had other issues here trying to get an established completion date from them. So while we are still, they're showing it as late November, but in all honesty, I think that's going to go into December as well. But again, other parts of the project are much more further along than others. I think what is lagging here is the science rooms, which is also the storm shelter part of the project, and then some of the mechanical items that are associated with it, as well as the finishes. But you'll see that a lot of the other classrooms, per se, in the addition wings, look pretty complete. I mean, they have finishes for the most part, have ceilings in, and PBK is starting to go through to do a lot of their inspections as we're trying to keep all that within handle. Mcmichael has a breakout of some work to be done next summer. That is the rest of the mechanical units that are over the existing school areas. So over the cafeteria, the gym, the kitchen areas, and then the band room areas. And those units are sitting on site right now, ready for when they are. We have some work that's going to be going on during the Christmas break. Some of the stuff that did not get completed in a timeline before this semester started, and this is mainly in locker rooms area where the lockers had not been completed yet. Some of the flooring in those areas have not been completed yet. The rooms are otherwise available, but they're not fully functional. So that work will be going on during Christmas. And again, showing the same kind of move-in as far as when the total school would be ready this summer for a turnover. Next down the line is Mike Moses roof and HVAC. That project is complete. The next one down is Mike Moses conversion. So that's the conversion renovations to an elementary school. That project is on the street right now bidding. That bid will happen on December 2nd, and we hope to bring those results to you at the December board meeting. The schedule has this construction going on through the summer of '22. We are trying to take some provisions for the playground equipment, which has become an extremely long lead time item, and some fencing site work, trying to get that bid out separately so that we can get ahead of that curve in terms of ordering and scheduling their installation. Moving is scheduled for the end of next summer when the work is complete. Fredonia Pre-K, we are finished, for Pre-K driveway, that is complete. There are some punch list items that will be completed during the Christmas break so that there's no disturbance to the school year while staff and kids are in there. The Fredonia Pre-K conversion, we are completing the documents right now. We hope to get out to bid here in the next 4 weeks or so, and we plan to bring that back to the board for approval either at January or February's board meeting. That work would then start during the summer and run through at least half of next semester or fall semester. Next is the high school CTE edition. That is complete. Kids are in it. There are still some punch list items remaining. Under construction still is the NHS CTE renovation, so that's all of the shop areas. They're doing pretty well on that project. They are arguably a couple weeks behind, but I think that is going faster because of the type of work that's going on in there. DSC, we know that's completed. Transportation's been completed. Brooks Quinn Jones HVAC was completed this summer. Next summer, we will be doing the roof over the kitchen. The NHS chiller and the NHS 9th grade HVAC is under design. We are should be bringing pricing to you at the next board meeting for both of those projects. That work is scheduled to happen over this summer. TJR HVAC is complete. Press box is under review at the moment through some meetings that we've been having. We're trying to understand and get a full scope identified. And if there's any questions on this, I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have.
I have one question, but I'm gonna direct it to Dr. Trujillo. If Carpenter is completed in the December timeframe, you know, can we look at getting kids in there earlier than next year?
It's all going to be contingent upon, I know Ralph is working with identifying a company to move us. And Ralph, is that almost 6 months out? Or it can be?
It can be as far as the major summer move goes. Carpenter's a little bit unique in that it's getting all new furnishings, all new electronics. You know, it's the total package, we hope. So we'll be limited to, you know, the office material, and then, of course, each teacher's personal, the room supplies. So it's a little different beast compared to Fredonia and Mike Moses, where we have to literally move every piece of furniture in order to do the renovation and then bring it back or replace it. So that's a completely different scenario.
But absolutely, we're going to weigh all the options. What we don't want is a building sitting there empty and the community
Absolutely.
seeing it.
Yes.
So the coordination with Ralph and his staff, also with our principal over at Carpenter, to figure out, okay, what does that look like? I also want to respect our teachers' time during that holiday. I don't want them to spend their time packing up and moving, and that's their vacation time. I want them to have some time so they can come back and meet the needs of the kids. So we'll be coordinating some of that to see how that may work to make the move when we get to that launch when it comes to, because there's still a lot of stuff. Even though we're equipping the building with new furniture, you'd be surprised how many gondolas you can actually fill up from instructional materials and all the things that we do have that need to come over and be prepared for the teachers to utilize.
Sure. I can imagine, and I know it's hard it's not ideal to move mid-year, but I can imagine it sure would be nice, if we get some cold weather, January, February,
Yeah.
to have those,
absolutely.
those students inside versus those out exterior hallways.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
I think if you have to move earlier, probably you have to, transportation has to reroute a lot of those buses as well.
That's true. Yeah. I have a question for Dr. Trujillo also. So, Fredonia Pre-K starts next school year, not open yet, and we're assuming that with Carpenter, those elementary kids will have a place to go, and all of our pre-K will have some place until we can move them in?
Absolutely. The plan is, and that's why we're giving Ralph and his team enough time when it comes to Mike Moses to get that taken care of. And if we didn't have, and we're trying to do Fredonia in the same summer that we're doing Mike Moses, it can complicate things. So what we've got is, we've got to get Mike Moses completed and ready to move in so that we can make a decision when it comes to Nettie Marshall. And so Nettie Marshall becomes available, and so the plan is that we go ahead and do the preliminary launch with our pre-K center and get the kids there. We have right now close to over 200 students that are committed to pre-K. And that's not without doing anything marketing-wise. When we start hitting the marketing with that to get that, we're excited. Mr. Z has been doing a tremendous job of hitting and marketing. I don't think there's a single person he's not met with that's at the DSC or even the services that we provide. And he's working very closely with Les Larberger about the marketing. So we've got the kids coming. Now some programming, we're having dialogue that some programming, for instance at BQJ, instead of moving those kids and moving them again, what we may do is at BQJ, we may keep that programming there so that we can attract as many of our pre-K families that we can. Otherwise, we have to say no, and we don't want to say no. That also gives us time to plan out what does our tuition-based pre-K look like when we do a launch for tuition-based pre-K for our families and the parents that want that. So we've got a plan in transition. We have the facility with Nettie. We've actually walked the building, we looked at it, we know that we can meet the needs that are there in that short time, because we won't have Fredonia ready at all to have our kids there. Ralph?
Yeah, just some backup on that. One of the critical things to Fredonia compared to some of our other projects, our summer schedule is a 60-day schedule, and that is an extremely tight schedule. Fredonia building dates back to the 50s. It hasn't seen a significant renovation. We're talking about a significant renovation to give to teaching and learning what they deserve, to provide the facility that we need to provide. And we can't do that in 60 days, so it's going to have to push into the fall.
I appreciate that, because I do know I've walked Fredonia, and I can see that it deserves time, and it deserves the investment of time to make that a wonderful showcase for our pre-K program.
We're all becoming educated on potty for the pre-K. You know, what does that need look like for our little ones? So that's just one portion of our education as we explore this.
I've got probably a bit of a request. I know I've been anxious. I know that there's been a lot of work in the CTE area.
Yes.
And I understand with that new CTE building, there was a lot of excitement about what that new expansion was going to allow for us. And I know currently, with temporarily housing those classes that will move back into the high school CTE area once those renovations are complete. But I would love to hear, maybe next month or following month, kind of a report and a vision for what that new CTE building is actually going to be doing and housing and what that's actually going to look like.
Absolutely.
We know there's been a lot of planning in the works, and I would like to kind of see the results of that.
Yes, absolutely. And we will definitely, Mr. Luskin and I will work closely to get that on our agenda. As we start moving forward, we're excited about that. And I'm telling you, walking that facility, Mr. Les walked it with us, our community of families that receive CTE instruction, although that new building is amazing, the amount of and the quality that's going to be in the bays and in that other area would be nice to update, because even the philosophy in there is being redefined by Mr. Lusk and his direction with the CTE teachers is exciting as we move forward. Pretty excited.
Wonderful.
Can I ask one question before we move on? Army, can you speak a little bit to, we have talked about this so the board is aware, those triangles, or those what is it, the arrows, the bidding arrows that are there?
Yes.
And I want to make sure we go on a matter of record, because we've had these conversations about 2 years ago. And a lot of things have happened during that time. So just for the sake of transparency, those arrows, those numbers, they're not dropping. So
As far as moving?
No, dropping as far as price.
Pricing.
So looking at that, I know we have the HVAC system over at the high school 9th grade center, and we don't have those items at all going to bid. So I know it's kind of a greasy pig to grab a hold of, but can you talk to us a little bit about those arrows?
Yeah, I'll start with the HVAC
Yes.
for NHS. In the way that we're approaching that project, we are in close contact with the contractors involved. And so we have had preliminary budgets based on the scope of work for the buildings given to us already. So without losing, grip of that greasy pig, we think we're in the ballpark so far before getting these final pricing in. There are some things to be ironed out because of the nature of some of those units, especially that contain or feed the gym, the competition gym. But given all that, so far, we seem to be in a good place on that. As far as Moses and Fredonia, Moses, I don't feel too bad about because of the nature of the work. It's primarily finishes in there, so flooring, paint, ceilings, etc., and then some accessories as well. Fredonia, that's got a little heavier construction going into it, and the hope is that by the time we do bid that, people will have a little more of a grip on construction materials and labor. And I think it really helps not trying to force that into a summer here. It gives them a little bit of breathing room, and I think that inspires some confidence in bidding for that project. Those are our major ones, coming up.
Yes, sir. And just to make sure the board is aware, the press box, We did cover that in his presentation. It is a priority. We made that commitment to our community. We are looking at that. And Army is actually taking the lead with regards to getting us some redrawing, some new plans to look at, to consider. So before that goes out to bid for the board to kind of take a look at the variety of directions that we can take when it comes to the press box. I just wanted to make sure the community was aware. We have not lost sight of the fact that it's still on the table. We're making sure that we're going to provide what we can under the budget that we do have, but make a significant impact so that we can maybe make it 10 years out. So it's not just I keep using pig examples, but lipstick on a pig.
No, we will bring some options back to you.
But anyway, just to make sure that the community knows that we are looking at that. Now, unfortunately, because of that, that kicks it out a little bit. Because if we're going back to getting the plans and the drawings, if you notice, we're looking into the summer of 2022. And I appreciate Army taking his expertise and what he's provided us to be able to provide us with something that we can entertain as a board, as an option as we move forward. So.
An item that's not here that I don't want to fall off our radar screen. I know we've kind of said, we kind of put it in the press box as future discussion, and I don't want it to fall off the paper, and that's the restrooms at Mcmichael for the football field.
Yeah, I think we can have them speak to the Mcmichael.
And I know we had some innovative thoughts in that area as well.
Yeah, we've been talking about the restrooms. We have a reduced plan, if you will, from that PBK has provided. We have talked to them about packaging that up and bidding it, getting pricing, and see where we come in. We kind of went through the exercise once with WRL, and we might go through it again as well with them so we can see all angles on it. But that is on our radar. And the utilities to that area are in place. That has been done. So it's just a matter of constructing the actual restrooms themselves.
That's great. I know that there's lots of parents that would be very grateful.
Yes, and just to clarify that, the bidding we speak of would be with new contractors in addition to WRL, because at this stage in the game, I just feel like we'd be ahead to have some competition and not just throw them a bone at the end of the project.
I agree. Yeah. I didn't really like the idea of it just being like a change.
Yeah.
I appreciate that.
All right. In your board book, we've also provided this brief presentation for you all. This is a look at the entrance over at the new Emmeline Carpenter, the main entrance. There's a lot of work that has been taking place. They're starting also to landscape over there. We saw quite a bit of landscaping, trees coming in, being planted. If you'll take a look at the photo on the left, that was taken in September. This photo on the right was taken just this week, October the 18th. And this is a pretty large space over there, very colorful space. You can see that it includes cafeterium, the gym, and also the stage area to some degree. I'll show you another angle of it.
Before you leave that photo, I couldn't stop talking about it. Can you explain to the board, Ralph, can you explain to the board, those basketball goals, this is an elementary school, those basketball goals compete with what we have at the high school.
Yes.
And they're better than probably what we have at the middle school. But can you give us the story behind that? Because the board needs to understand that on the positive side of what happens, we get to celebrate some things. And not often do we get that. So can you explain to them a little bit about that?
The supply chain that we've all heard about works both ways. In this case, the basketball goals that we had ordered could not be provided, but they had another set that somebody else didn't take, much better set than what we had ordered, and we got them at the same price. So
Nice.
That's what I was gonna say, we got the same price, right?
Yeah.
All right.
And we had a similar situation at Mcmichael with a dishwasher. A big Hobart dishwasher couldn't be provided, and we've got one that's a little bit better for the same price. So there's some give and take, and it's that part of the project, the finished part of the project, where there's a lot of that, supply issue. We can't get this. Is this okay? It's very interesting.
Well, it sounds like you've got somebody on the team that's a really good negotiator.
For orientation, this picture is actually taken from the stage or the stage area and shooting backwards.
Yes, sir, that's correct. Here's the kitchen area at Emily Carpenter. Very nice kitchen. I'm sure Ms. Thacker and her staff will be very pleased to cook out of this kitchen. This is the opposite view of looking at the stage, and if you can see those little tiny folks back there, that is Dr. Trujillo and Dr. Hill and myself. Over on the left is the comparison of this same area in July. So there, you can see that there's quite a bit of work that's taken place in this area of the building. This is one of the main hallways coming into the building from the front side. Okay, the learning tree. We've talked so many times, discussed the learning tree. The learning tree is starting to take shape, and actually yesterday while we were out there, they had started putting some finishes on this tree. I failed to put a shot of that finish in here, but it is. We will present it in the next update. And then on the right-hand side is some of the interior area of the school. As well, more interior, the actual learning stairs are further along than this picture indicates. And again, I'll bring those next time we come in. Or you may see them in one voice. More interior shots. The one on the left is kind of one of the main hallways through the office area. I believe it's going to be on the right side. Goes to the classrooms. Mm-hmm. And then we go to classrooms. There are a lot of classrooms that are almost complete. And if you'll notice, the classroom pods are color-coded.
Ralph, that looks like the flooring that does not require waxing.
Two thumbs up.
There you go. Well done. Well done.
The Malcolm Rector Center for Advanced Careers and Innovation. As Mr. Curtis indicated earlier, we do have students already moved into the new center. I'm going to begin with the renovation side of it. We've got renovations going on to the old wood shop, the welding, automotive, and the other shops on the exterior side of the existing high school. A lot of these areas I didn't even recognize stepping in. There's a lot of walls and things that have been removed. It looks very spacious and very inviting as we toured, and it's only getting better by the day. Dog wash here. They have been very thoughtful in putting in an entrance and a hallway from the outside of the building so that our customers or their customers will be able to access the dog wash program from the outside. Just bring their animal straight in and not have to go through a lot of different, a maze basically is what they used to have to go through. And now to the new CTE Center, occupied by students. There's health science out there currently. Let's see, we have several other classes going on, students out there, looking very good. This is the open bay area. This is the administrative area. This is a very large conference room, very spacious conference room. We're already making plans for usage of this conference room. Should Mr. Autry let us come out and Mr. Luss let us come out and meet. Mcmichael Middle School. These photos were back from July. Unfinished flooring, still some walls and things going up there. A better look would be on the right side, right photograph now, finished. That is the expanded part of the cafeteria.
Mr. Martin, how many people can be seated in that cafeteria at one time?
Refer to Mr. Curtis, you recall?
I don't know off the top of my head.
Are we looking at 400 or 500, or do we know?
We're, let's see. I'm gonna have to get back to you on that question, Dr. Gorman.
Okay.
Okay?
They all don't eat at the same time, do they?
Right, yes. We are hoping a grade level was the planning.
Well, and the tabling that the campus uses is more of the round with the chairs. So even the tabling is going to be a little more restrictive than the traditional cafeteria. Traditional cafeteria, you would have these long tables and you'd sit there, and it'd be easier to come up with a number, but because of the fact that we're using more of the round tables with the sled, with the chairs in it, the numbers, whatever numbers Army and the team comes up with, would have to be adjusted to the type of furnishing that's been provided and the direction that the campus uses. So it's just, a lot of it has to do with furnishing as well. So.
That's right. The additional lunch line, all new, nice hardware there. This is a classroom. I think they were finishing up some meal work. But this is one of the new classrooms in the new wing. As you can see, this is just a shot from the outside over on the left picture, and the right picture is just a shot of down the new hallway there. Of course. Ms. Roberts.
If I may, I would just like to say that we've had a lot of issues, as y'all know, with our WRL, but they have given us one of the best superintendents. Mm-hmm. She has been absolutely amazing and has really brought this project all together. And without Barbara, I really don't think we would see an end in sight. So just to let y'all know, there is a good thing happening.
Thank you.
President Fitch, that concludes our report for this month.
Thank you so much,
Any
Mr.
questions?
Martin. Any additional questions, comments, or discussion?
I just anxious to see it all done so we can get these kids in the new school. It's just going to be amazing. And I know it takes time, but I'm not a very patient man at my age.
Hey, we echo those sentiments. We'd like to see our kids in those buildings as well.
I know you guys are working diligently, and we appreciate it. It's one of those things. When it comes to construction, it's one of those things.
Thank you, Board.
All right. All right. If no one else has any other comments, we'll move to item 8C, our bilingual program annual evaluation. Dr. Soseda, welcome.
Thank you. Good afternoon, President Finch, board members, Superintendent Dr. Trujillo. So tonight I would like to present just a very snippet of the Bilingual and ESL program and migrant program evaluation. So there's going to be 5 different areas that I'm going to talk to you about. I know that you had an opportunity to preview this presentation, so I'm just going to kind of highlight some information on the slides and then answer any questions that you may have at the end of the presentation. So I'm going to talk to you about the overall academic progress of our students, the progress in the linguistic proficiency that they have, the number of students that exited our program, the professional development, and the approaches that we are taking into making sure that our students continue making progress, and also the expected bilingual education exceptions and ESL waivers. This is the total number of our identified students right now that we have in the district as today. Within that category, we also have to look at 2 different groups, which is our migrant students and immigrant students. And the reason is that those different group of students have unique needs that we have to care for and provide additional supports. We have 305 students that we are monitoring that were exited our program in previous years. And from the last school year, we have 8 students who reclassified or exited our program. This next slide has a lot of numbers, but we want to show the students' progress in 2 different categories. The first one is to compare how our students did, for example, 2019 to 2021. You do not see 2020 as we didn't test students there. But another thing that we also like to point out is how our students did, for example, from cohort to cohort, which is what the matching color coded represents. For example, the blue on the first blue on 2019 were our first graders back then. Now there are 6th graders, which is the blue on the 2021. So what I wanted to say is that we not only look at the progress individually year to year, but also how are those students making progress as they move along. This is the same, but for math. And another important thing to say is that as a department, we look at the progress of our students, but I'm really proud to say that as part of the teaching and learning team, that we're not only looking at these students in isolation, because our bilingual students are general students first. So it's a team effort with all the departments, with CTE, with special education, with every principal, and we all collaborate together to make sure that our students are making the progress. Now we also look at the linguistic progress of our students. This table just shows the overall progress and based on the TELPAS, which is the Texas English Linguistic Assessment system that we use. Now, you see in there that 133 students made an overall score of Advanced High. Now, I wanted to say that the overall score is taking into account the 4 different areas, which is the listening, speaking, reading, and writing. What the state takes into account is that the student made progress in all 4 areas in order to count. So for example, if you see that 833 students says that they didn't make progress, which is not really true, because most of the students actually made progress in 1, 2, or 3 areas, but they're not taken into account unless they made progress in all 4 areas. So that is an important fact that we need to take into consideration. We also need to point out that one of the most difficult areas for the students to make progress is going to be in the speaking part, and just because it's more difficult for them to get comfortable speaking. And then having a pandemic year provides students with less opportunities to practice that speaking area. The next slide is just the number of students in special education who took the TELPAS alternate test and also their progress. They do have a different evaluation system, but we are also taking into consideration the progress that our students in special education are making every year. One of the most important things that we have to look at as a program is not only looking at the scores, but what are we going to do to help them this year based on what they did last year. So we have to start with obviously identifying where our students are. And even though you saw just the big picture of where everybody is, we go down to students' names. Because once we identify where every student is, the campus is already creating not only their academic individual goals, but also their linguistic goals. For example, if Evelyn Sauceda was beginning last school year in listening, speaking, reading, and writing, as a student, I am going to know that my goal for this year is going to be to advance in intermediate for all the different areas. So that's one of the things to identify. The next step is to plan strategically some plans. Once again, as part of the entire system. This is not something in addition to rather than a team effort, because we work collaborative, especially in these times when teachers do not have enough time. We want to make sure that whatever strategies we use are not only going to help our students, but all students in general. And that's what the next, using the 7 steps, which is a district-wide instructional strategies, which have been very helpful, because those strategies not only help our bilingual students or English language students or emerging bilingual, but also are helpful for any student from pre-K all the way to high school to any subject. And those are strategies that all our teachers in the entire district are familiarized with. In addition to that, those are strategies that our administrators, principals, and CAPs are also used to, so then they can help when they are doing some walkthroughs. In addition, we are making sure that we're using our state adopted materials and also provide those feedback to the teachers that might need them. The last item that I have is the expected bilingual education exceptions and waivers. The first table shows only the bilingual exception. If you can see, there's 2 different colors. The light blue shows the bilingual classrooms that might need an exception. And I said might need is that some of those teachers are currently working towards trying to pass their test before snapshot, so those numbers might change. The darker blue representing classrooms that are being served by a certified bilingual teacher. One of the things that I also need to point out is that when I say classrooms, that doesn't mean that the teachers in the light blue are not certified. It just means that those teachers are working towards getting their bilingual certification. The bottom table shows the possible ESL waivers. And you see a variety of numbers that a lot of the times, once again, that doesn't represent teachers without certification rather than teachers who are working towards getting their, ESL certification. And that's it for me. Do you have any questions?
I have a question.
Yes, sir.
At the beginning of your presentation, you said you had 1,661 students.
Yes.
How does that compare, or do you know how that compares to pre-COVID, like in 2019? Has there been an increase in our students in the bilingual program?
We have, prior to the pandemic, during the pandemic, we lost a big number of our students, just as any other program as a district. This number, I believe, to compare to last year, we have, I'm going to say, about 100 less students than last year. However, I can tell you that when I'm looking at my immigrant students, right now, we have 45 students. Last school year, throughout the entire year, we have 10. I also have to point out that this is just the beginning, I'm going to say the school year. Identification continues throughout the year as new students are coming in. So those numbers continuously change. So we usually have a final number. So yes, that number might be lower, but that doesn't mean that it's not going to get higher at the end of the school year, just as I'm seeing for the immigrant students as being really high by now.
Well, I just want to say, I know that the teachers, the bilingual teachers, are as all teachers, but the bilingual teachers are very dedicated to helping these kids, and I really appreciate them because they really put in a lot of work with their students, as do other teachers, but bilingual teachers really seem to be focused on helping these kids be educated, and I appreciate them, and appreciate you as a director in guiding them, and also you, Doctor. Okay? Thank you so much.
Dr. Saucedo, if I may, what can we do? I know that bilingual teachers are few and far between, unfortunately. What can we do as a district to kind of, number one, recruit more bilingual teachers in, but number two, develop some type of program or grow your own program to encourage more bilingual educators in general?
Well, yes, there's a lot of, so with your first question, what can we do to kind of keep, we are, in the process of writing a program or a plan not only to support but to retain our, our teachers right now, because there's a lot of stress that all teachers, but we have to take care, particular attention to our bilingual teachers, just because by nature we have a lot of our bilingual teachers who have many years of experience, and we want to avoid them from retiring. So there's a lot of things that we can do. So we're usually doing throughout the year, providing additional incentives, and know that not all teachers are important, but just because we're required to not only hire, but also to retain bilingual teachers in the district. Going to your second question, is there anything else that we can do to grow our own? From the past 2 years, I've been working very closely with Stephen F. Austin State University with the program of the education, because they have a new program in a small cohort of bilingual students seeking those bilingual positions. So working with human resources and placing those interns in bilingual classrooms kind of help them, see themselves in that position, but also allowed us to kind of have one-on-one communication. So throughout the year, we already identified who are SFA graduates who live locally are going to graduate in December. So we have already contacted them. I know them by name. We have invited them and seen how wonderful NISD is. Another project that we have is looking into other programs that we can do to start our own students in middle school, so then we can kind of help them into education, knowing that, most of our female students remain with their parents and our population is growing. So there's a lot of plans there.
I'm excited to hear that. I've always thought that had a lot of potential to try to reach to our existing students in middle school and high school and help them see the opportunities that a career in education could offer them. So thank you for that.
Yes, ma'am.
Dr. Trujillo, my thoughts on that, I want to say a couple of years ago you came to us and you were talking about the shortage of science and math teachers at the high school, and I know the board heard that call. And I would suspect, I'm not speaking for this board, but, if that opportunity is there and you feel like that could help attract and retain qualified bilingual teachers, I know that they are heavily recruited across the state of Texas.
Absolutely. And I might add, Dr. Hill and I, we've had conversations with regards to growing our own. What does that look like? How are we designing the folks that are in there? And the gentleman sitting back there in the back, he knows exactly what I'm talking about, Mr. Z. I've already got him on the job, and we're a year out. Because if you look at pre-K, you've got to find the best pre-K teachers that meet the needs of our kids, and a lot of those kids are going to be in a bilingual qualifications with regards to the services that we have. So we're coming up with a strategic plan of what that may look like, and it may be having to commit, because there's a difference between, and the principals that are out here, they know exactly what I'm talking about, hiring somebody that you can get earlier in the year versus 2 weeks out before school starts, because your numbers dictate you have to have it. So we want to make sure that we get the horse in front of the cart, not the other way around. And that's what's exciting. The other part of it is when I walk this campus, the campuses in the district, I'm going to tell you, we have a hidden jewel, and it's our paraprofessionals. The number of bilingual teachers that when you just scratch beneath the surface and you talk to them, they began as a paraprofessional. And the encouragement and knowing that we have a university and letting them know, go into teaching, those folks are invested in Nacogdoches. They've been here as paraprofessionals, and they're still here 10, 15, 20 years down the road. So a lot of it is not only going out and finding the new ones, but also looking at the ones that are already in-house and have a passion for education. That also causes us to look at partnerships. I know SFA might be on the listening to it, but I'm going to challenge them because I've got great connections with Texas Tech. And Texas Tech works with your folks that are having your that are working as instructional aides and be able to continue to get on. And there's a lot of the universities that are looking at how to grow your bilingual teachers so that you have it. But I will also say, and you mentioned in your number, it's not always bilingual teachers. Every teacher that we have, if they're taught the ESL strategies, and we have the SIOP, every teacher from elementary all the way to high school must be SIOP trained. They need to understand that the tendency of an ESL student or a bilingual student is every kid in the classroom. If SIOP works for bilingual kids, it absolutely works for all kids. And so the strategies and the effectiveness of giving our teachers the endorsements, and I applaud Dr. Salceda, that's a critical number when we look at ESL teachers, and there might be something there. Because that's another area that we may need to look at. I know that it's costly for a teacher to take the ESL test. However, if you pass the test, what if we reimbursed you for taking the test?
We already do that.
And see, that's the key, is trying to get that going, the incentives. So there's pieces that we are doing to motivate and encourage our teachers, but also we've got to continue to build a tremendous plan, as Dr. Salceda and the staff and our building principals, on retaining that jewel so that they don't go up the highway or down the highway from what we're providing. So there's a lot of, it's multifaceted. And then I'm going to end on this one because I was excited to see it up there. And I know it makes Dr. Hill excited, and it should all of us when we're talking academics. We're getting to the point that it's now meets, masters, and approaches, meets, and masters is everywhere. And when we have a great program, then it attracts great teachers, and then we retain the kids. And that's the key, is when we're talking across the line with approaches, meets, and masters, then we know that we're not making a distinction between programming. We're saying we're going to meet every kid so that the same rule applies whether you're in special education or you're in our ESL classrooms or bilingual classrooms or gen ed classrooms. So it's exciting times for us to look at it. But we have a university here that has kids, and I'm grateful you have a great relationship with them. But sometimes if we can also branch out and find out how can we build those partnerships out there, because there's bilingual teachers everywhere. And I know you and I have talked about this, right, and about the market, just south and east of us, and north and west, and how can we make it so that our folks are paid for the job that they're doing, and it's very competitive. So we're looking at all of that and seeing what we can come to the board with some plans of what that may look like. So, Dr. Salceda, I saw some amazing things in your presentation that I wanted to make sure the board, I know they saw it, but I wanted to make sure to spotlight it for the work that you're doing.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Once again, I just must applaud how you're always ahead of us, and you touched on something that I wanted to bring up, and that is our ESL teachers. I was looking at that overall number, and that's just under a third of our student population. But when I talk to the community, they assume that these are all Spanish speakers. And I know I said this last year, and I'll still be here next year, and I'm going to say it again. We have students from, let's see, this year, I know we have some Eastern European students, we have some from African nations, we have some from Asian nations, as well as our Latin American. And that is where we're doing great things with bilingual, but I'm so glad you mentioned the ESL. It is costly, but you have ESL teachers, or you have a regular teacher who has not been ESL certified, so we have to get a waiver. But in their classroom, they have 4 languages going on, and they need that training. And so I'm just very glad that you're already on it.
Yes, and we have a plan because we do recognize that Spanish is not the only one. All teachers have to be able to serve all students. So the plan and the professional development plan that we have throughout the year is to meet exactly that need. How can we help teachers to help all students?
Very valuable point, Mrs. Apt. Any other questions, comments, discussion? All right. Hearing none, we'll move to item 8D on our agenda. That is to hear a report on the TASA-TASB Conference Delegate Assembly. Dr. Groman.
Adjust your ears for a fast report. All you principals, administrators, and staff still with us, and everybody still online. We have 2 object report. Number 1 is safety and health, safety, and security. What does this mean? Well, my plan was when I go there, I'll just go stand up in the back if it's crowded. Well, I never did that, but I never used this. This is to mark your chair next to you. Don't sit there because I'm afraid of you. And I didn't see anybody else use those, but that just got stuck in my book. And that, this health, safety, and security, there were 300 of us in the delegate assembly, and even there it wasn't crowded. Everything went well. And during the whole time of this meeting, there's other meetings that are going to go on studying how to be safe in these times. And so even the winter governance in Galveston, they're there studying how can we apply this in Galveston. And the same way about my hotel, you can only have 2 people in an elevator. And I, alone at my table at all the restaurants that I walk to. So, okay, that's number 1. Number 2, here. That's number 2. That's just a small book that you have to master in one afternoon. But it's a real challenge. There are victories and defeats like that wide world of sports. Remember the victories and defeats, all that? Well, anyway, there are a lot of those. But the thing that we need to know out of all this is business was done that helped Texas students, okay? And this is all students. So we got together to do that. The most important thing that we need to know is if you want to contact the TASB Board of Directors, Region 7, Board of Directors is Tony Raymond and West Sabine, and you can find him on the internet. And this concludes our reports. You may shut off your ears.
Thank you, Dr. Groman, and thank you for serving as our district's delegate to that meeting again this year. All right, that will take us to our final item on the agenda. Do I hear a motion?
I move that we adjourn.
Thank you, Mrs. Winslow.
I second the motion.
Thank you. I didn't even have to ask. Thank you, Reverend. I appreciate that. All those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Thank you for your time tonight.
Yeah.